Across time and space, from Skaro to Gallifrey, one thing remains constant. The Daleks never give up, never give in, and never stop exterminating. Welcome, time travellers, to Hit or Miss Doctor Who, the podcast where we travel through the highs, lows, and timey-wimey moments of the Whoniverse. And welcome to the official start of our Dalek-themed series. We did drop our review of the film Doctor Who and the Daleks, a re-upload last week from our sister podcast. We'd already done it on the Silver Screen podcast, just as a little amuse-bouche, but now we're here for a proper deep dive into the pepperpots with anger management issues. I am your host, Michael Wilson, and as always, I'm joined by my loyal co-conspirator and temporal chaos, DK. Welcome, mate.
Oh, hello.
How are you doing, all right?
I'm not too bad, thank you.
Awesome. And now we're not facing the time vortex alone tonight. We've got a fantastic pair of guests joining us. First up, making his debut in the Hit or Miss TARDIS, it's Cliff. Welcome aboard, Cliff.
Hello, thank you very much.
Anytime. And yeah, as I say, I've heard you're something of an expert on this, so we're expecting quite a lot of Dalek knowledge potentially coming from you, so no pressure.
No.
And yeah, back for another trip through time and space, our resident expert madman with a box. It's our good friend, Will Templar. Good to have you back at last, buddy.
Hi, guys. Thanks for inviting me back. It's been a long time.
A very long time, and but we're always happy to talk Doctor Who. We do that anyway, so you know.
Will left saying, one day I shall come back.
And I have. Not long overdue, but like the first Doctor, but we'll see how this goes.
Exactly. All right, cool. Right then, we've got a packed show ahead of us. Coming up, the return of the legendary Hit or Miss section, where we'll be debating whether some Doctor Who curiosities deserve a place of honour or should be quietly dumped like a body in the Thames. Not that we'd get caught doing that, of course. Then, for our main review, we're heading to a Dalek-occupied Earth, where we'll be dodging patrols, avoiding the Slyther, and hoping not to get robotized, exterminated, or, worst of all, left behind without a shoe. That's right, we're taking a deep dive into the Dalek Invasion of Earth. So, yeah, before we start dodging Dalek death rays, let's engage the old TARDIS databanks with some getting to know you Who questions. That's right, pull the lever, set the coordinates, and brace yourself as we head into the vortex. So, this is going to be quite new for everyone because this is, like I said, we're a very new podcast. We're quite young. I've only done one episode that I recorded for this, which was a Christmas special review from this year, and so we're all kind of newies. And so I want to go around and basically ask everybody what your first experience was to Doctor Who, and if you can remember your first story that you ever saw that, not necessarily that you saw ever, but that got you hooked into the show. And DK, first of all, have I actually asked you this question?
You have asked me this. You asked me this when we did the Joy to the World review, I believe.
I did think that, yeah, so that's good, because that saves a lot of time. So instead, we will go to, I know you've probably answered this already once or twice, Will, but we'll come to you and ask you the same question.
Oh, yeah. So I was an avid viewer of the Sarah Jane Adventures because when the Tennant era was happening, I was very much a young kid, so I was still on CBBC as opposed to BBC One. I was like 2 years old when Doctor Who started again in 2005.
Right.
So yeah, Sarah Jane Adventures was my thing, and then my nan, who was Doctor Who fan since she was like she was my age. She was my age when William Hartnell was the Doctor, and she says she claims anyway, every single classic Who story. So she's well versed in it. She loves Tom Baker and Matt Smith. But she pulled me in and she was like, you've got to come and watch this. And it was the 10th Doctor regeneration into Matt Smith in 2010, because she already knew I was kind of a fan of that world. So my first ever impression and memory of the show is David Tennant walking in the snow to his TARDIS, closing the door and regenerating. And, you know, when you watch something like that when you're about 7 years old, it stays with you. And yeah, it's no wonder that Matt Smith was my favourite Doctor and still is, when that was my first impression, and I've loved the show ever since.
Yeah, I think a lot of people always say it's your first Doctor that remains your favourite, and if that was the one that got you hooked on the show, it's kind of understandable. So
absolutely.
Yeah, awesome. So what about you, Cliff? What's your story as to how you came to Doctor Who?
Well, from a very young age. So imagine 1985, I'm 3 years old or 3.5 years old. And around the same time as season 22 was on, at an age where I would be having my tea on Saturday, and we might have the A-Team on, or we might have Doctor Who. We just have some telly on, so it wouldn't be very consistent. But I'm convinced I have little memories of the old Borad on the screen from Time Lash, which is like the most rubbish first memory you could possibly have. 'Cause, I don't mind Time Lash, but but I have much stronger memories of Stengos inside the glass Dalek begging Natasha to kill him. So it's like, a man who's been turned into a Dalek begging his daughter to kill him. I was 3 years old. No wonder I've grown up to be such a well-adjusted and stable member of society. And then I have much, much clearer memories of the first half of Trial of a Time Lord. I don't remember anything of the second half of Trial of a Time Lord. I think that's because I was banned from watching it because I was really upset that Perry died.
Ironically, you didn't find out that wasn't true then, which is
well, yes, that's the thing. If they just let me carry on, it would have been all right. So I completely missed Sylvester McCoy's first year, and I always used to think, I must have been going to Cubs around that time, but I was slightly too young, so I don't know. But yeah, and then Remembrance of the Daleks was heavily trailed, and Doctor Who magazine was knocking around. The videos were starting to become more accessible in shops and the rental kind of places, because they seem quite rare to begin with. And so I sort of became a full-blooded fan at the age of 6 turning 7 with Remembrance, I think.
Nice, awesome. And do you have a favourite classic and a favourite new Who story? I'm not going to split us into 3 sections and do the whole starting again with RTD2. Let's keep it at classic and new, I think, for now. So, yeah.
That makes sense. I'm a Libra, so obviously star signs are nonsense apart from when they're exactly the same as my personality. So I find decisions very difficult. I think in most recent years, I tend to say the War Games is my favourite story. Not necessarily the butchered music colorized version, but the proper version of the War Games. I adore that from classic, but I also love stuff like Full Circle and the Happiness Patrol, quite a wide range of stuff. Brain of Morbius I was obsessed with for a very long time. Yeah, so kind of stuff. I mean, from New Who, I think Heaven Sent or Day of the Doctor are probably, they're very easy options because I'm sure they're pretty popular. But I will have a good time if I sit down and watch Day of the Doctor. I saw that at the BFI. I was in the after party, believe it or not. I was the guy in the waistcoat that had the Weeping Angel slowly creep towards them because my friend got 2 free tickets to go. We kind of thought we'd be seeing it in full 3D in the cinema. It's like, no, it was on a little telly in the bar, surrounded by Doctor Who companions who didn't know why they were there or what they were supposed to do. And I met Liam Russell, and he was lovely. But yes, Day of the Doctor and Heaven Sent, probably my easy New Who favourites.
Back over to you then, Will. I'm going to ask you the same thing. Favourite classic, if you have one, and a favourite New Who story?
I'll give you a top 3 because my first 2 are very standard basic ones, and then I've got a rogue one. So I've got The Seeds of Doom. That's probably my all-time favourite classic Who. Then also Remembrance of the Daleks. And then my rogue one is actually, I think it's a story after this. It's The Rescue.
It is after this, yeah, absolutely.
After the one we're reviewing today. The Rescue, I think, is just a phenomenal 2-parter. And then in Modern Who, it hasn't changed for about a decade since I actually transmitted it. I love Listen from Series 8, Peter Capaldi's first series. I think that's euphoric experience, and it holds up on every rewatch. And it could have been even better if the deleted scene with the candles in the TARDIS was kept in. I have no idea why they cut that scene, but yeah, it's just a perfect episode for me. It encompasses the best of Moffat and the time travel element of the show. So yeah, fantastic episode.
Awesome. Cool. And yeah, because this is a themed series, we're going to be looking at all things Dalek related. I have to ask you, since thankfully you didn't, just dump a bunch of Dalek episodes, do you have a favourite Dalek story of the entirety of Doctor Who? And I'll come to you first, Will. Why not? And we'll go around that way again.
Oh, ironically, besides Remembrance of the Daleks, which I've already mentioned, my favourite Dalek story would probably be The Chase, which is another William Hartnell story. I think that's another one that utilises time travel and space hopping quite well. You have scenes in New York, and then you've also got scenes of Dracula body slamming the Dalek. So it's just a fantastic serial. Similar to this one that we're reviewing today, it's quite breezy. It's a rare example of a well-paced William Hartnell story. And yeah, so the Dalek Invasion of Earth is on the upper end of Dalek stories. I don't think there's a single dud per se, but the chase is like far and away my favorite besides Remembrance, which is like a given. Like, it's a fantastic story.
So basically, it's safe to say that you love season 2 then, if you've already shouted out Dalek Invasion of Earth, The Rescue, and The Chase.
I think it's Hartnell's strongest series. I probably mention it in the review later, but I do think after this story, Ian and Barbara become lesser characters, and their departure was timely in The Chase. But besides the characterization of those two characters, I think season 2 is like the best 60s season, I would say.
And of course, the best episode of the season is the Web Planet, as we all know. So
absolutely not, Michael. Although you did have that opinion for a long time.
I know you hate it so much. I find it so amusing how much you hate it. Anyway,
to be fair.
Yeah, they did the best they could. But anyway, so yeah, Cliff, sorry, over to you. What's your favourite Dalek story of the entire gamut?
Oh God, it's like choosing your favorite child, because I even love Dalek stories. I mean, Remembrance was, an absolutely fantastic kind of first proper story as a fan to watch all the way through. I taped it, watched it over and over again. I think it holds up to this day. I was delighted when the season 25 Blu-ray set came out. And it's treated so well on there. I love Genesis. I had the audio cassette, the cut down version of it when I was very small. And sometimes I kind of think of Genesis as that cut down version, cliffhangers in a different place and, bits, all finessed. I love Rob Shearman's Dalek from the new series. I thought it was incredibly clever. That whole concept of let's take everything that people make jokes about and are silly about in terms of Daleks and just make everything brutal and deadly. So not only do you see them going upstairs again, like, millions more people see them this time, but, the swivel section and the plunger and all that clever stuff. But also my recent kind of two loves, I kind of grew up thinking Death to the Daleks wasn't that good. But then I sort of had a bit of an epiphany and I've sort of fallen in love with it in later time. And, that whole kind of Chariots of the Gods, Ancient Aliens and Daleks, and, they look so good, the silver ones. And Evil of the Daleks as well. I had the very scratchy, really rubbish cassette version of it in the early 90s, and I found it impossible to get into because you could hardly hear it and the narration was very poor. But having seen the animation, it's just blown me away just how good and how fresh and modern. It feels quite like a Russell T Davies story at times. I think it's endured incredibly well, that whole mood and that style and the mad ideas.
Yeah, awesome. And since I know I didn't ask you this during the Joy to the World review, DK, favourite Dalek story overall?
It's going to be very basic because everyone's already mentioned it, but it's Remembrance.
Very popular story, Remembrance, yeah. Well, we're reviewing quite a lot of the ones mentioned, I think, in this series. I know we definitely have Dalek coming up next week and Remembrance later in the year. And so quite a few varied things to come. And so the very last question I was going to ask in this little kind of getting to know you thing, at time of recording, we are almost on top of Doctor Who Season 2, if you want to call it that, Series 15, if you have common sense. So I'm just curious if you guys are excited for Season 2 and if there's anything that you've seen from the trailers and publicity that you're most excited to see. I'll just go around clockwise, so Will, I'll start with you first. Counterclockwise,
I am genuinely so excited. Season 1, or Series 14, as you put it, I would say it got better as it went along, besides the finale. And it was the first time I've actually been excited for Doctor Who since Matt Smith left, so if I'm being honest. Like, I'd say Capaldi was even better than Matt Smith. However, I haven't been so excited for the next episode for like at least 10 years. So to follow up with a series and a trailer specifically, and the promotional material altogether, it looks like such a step up from Season 1. And it's had, unlike Season 1, it's had so much time in post-production. It's had so much time to have like revisions and tweaks to like optimize it. So I can't see the series being bad at all. And It's got some fantastic new writers, and I'm looking forward to the Lucky Day episode that I'm reviewing with Pasty Sheep. Like, that looks good. I'm excited to see what P. McTighe cooks under Russell T Davies. because his work outside the television stuff is like sublime. So I'm very
Yeah.
excited for the series, and hopefully the finale, which is interestingly titled, like actually sticks to the landing this time, and we get a good Doctor Who series for the first time in yonks. But yeah,
Yeah,
very much looking forward
absolutely.
to it.
Cool. And same question, Cliff. Are you excited for? Are you still watching the show? First of all, are you excited for the new season? And has anything particularly grabbed your attention from the promos? If you're a person that watches those.
Yeah, I mean, pretty similar feelings to Will, I think. I went on a bit of a downer for Who. I didn't enjoy it for a few years. And then when the Tennant specials happened, I really loved those because it felt properly dynamic and interesting and multi-layered and clever and funny again. And then the first Duty series was a bit of a mixed bag for me. Hated Space Babies, and I'm a massive Beatles geek. And I kind of thought the Devil's Chord, the Beatles are in the Devil's Chord, but I don't think it's written by a Beatles geek. I don't think Russell T Davies is that interested in the Beatles, which was a bit of a shame, especially with like the Big Finish fanfare for the Common Men by Eddie Robson, which is terrific. And then it got better in the middle. So I thought Boom was terrific. Boom was the sort of Doctor Who I wanted to see. Mostly enjoyed 73 Yards. Loved Dot and Bubble. Rogue was fun. Ending was a bit, is that it? So I kind of assume, but I did think the trailer for season 2 looked absolutely stunning. I was very much brought back on board. Some of those shots, the design, the lighting, the just sort of the general quality of it looks like a step up. And I'm kind of betting the farm on all of those fan theories about season 1 and the sort of the odd inconsistencies and the fantasy elements and the weird things, and Mrs. Flood getting properly paid off. Russell T Davies did an interview. So. Yeah, I think he sort of said, I'm not going to explain Mrs. Flood. It's just funny if you don't. And I was like, no. I think he is. So.
No, I mean, he said that, but I think in either the same event or a similar kind of one, they interviewed Anita Dobson, and she said, no, you will get an explanation by the end of season 2. It will be made clear. We're not just moving
now. Like, she's going to be in every season 2 episode, and we do get a payoff, Russell said, in like recent weeks. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, cool. And same question, DK.
I kind of feel like I'm copying everyone else's homework here. This is the second time that I'm following the trend. But yes, like Will, like Cliff, kind of fell out of love with Doctor Who for a little while. But Duty's last season really brought me back. I really, apart from that finale, that was pretty ropey. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. And as I said in the Joy to the World review, I think he's the best Doctor we've had in a while. He really is good. So I'm excited to see more of him. I'm really excited to see, and forgive me if I pronounce it wrong, Verada Sethu as the new companion. So yeah, I'm just really looking forward to it. It has been a while since I was excited about New Who, like Will said. So when it came to the last season and I was actually looking forward to next week, it was an odd experience. So I'm looking forward to more of that.
Awesome, that's cool. Yeah, and I'm most excited just for Varada, to be perfectly honest, because I never used to be somebody that...
I wonder why. I know you.
Well, I was going to explain. I never used to be somebody that was bothered about thinking representation matters or whatever. But she's actually originally from around near where I live, and I swear there's moments in the trailer when I can hear her accent, and it goes into the kind of almost Geordie accent, and I'm like, she sounds like me. The companion sounds like me.
I didn't know that.
I saw today, isn't it? She's from Benton, which is just perfect.
Yeah.
I didn't know there was a place in Benton, but it's brilliant.
Not Sergeant Benton the place in the northeast of England, but yes.
Warrant Officer Benton, yeah.
Sorry, very much looking forward to. Well, I would have been anyway. I mean, I'm gutted that we're not going to probably get to see as much as I would have liked of Ruby, of Millie again, but at least she's still in it. So yeah, excited to see where the series goes, and hoping to get surprised and not have it be like, haha, this one-off person from 40 years ago is back. Because that was a little bit of a letdown. But anyway, right. So that's that out of the way then. So we will trundle on in the old hit or miss TARDIS, and we're going to move to the section that gives the podcast its name. We're going to go to the hit or miss section, and I'll just jump in right now. There we go.
How I hate these hit or miss performances.
so if you're not familiar with the hit or miss section, the way that works is that I just throw out some random things from anywhere in the Whoniverse, and I ask our guests and my co-host if they are a hit or a miss. And, the reasons why, we debate back and forth if necessary, and we try to come to a conclusion if we can. There's 4 of us, so we might end up with, right down the middle, but it rarely ever happens. I've only got 4 today because we're dealing with quite a long 6-part Classic Who episode, so I'm sticking to just 4 things. So, is everybody ready to face the hit or miss section?
Let's do it. I'm excited.
Go for it.
Yeah.
So the very first thing on the hit or miss section today, just to start us off lightly with something completely not controversial, hit or miss, the Daleks in colour. And it should be coming up on screen right now. There we go. And I'm going to come to you first, Will, for this one.
Please don't. I need to actually see if I watched this. I'm not sure if I actually have.
You never watched it? Okay, well, we'll move along. And so, Cliff, have you seen the Daleks in colour, and what were your thoughts?
I've seen most of it until I gave up on it, and it was a miss for me, I'm afraid. It's sort of the editing started well and then deteriorated. And there was too much music, too much modern 80s music, which didn't work.
Yeah, I can't disagree with you, to be honest. I mean, I feel like it's a very brief trip to you to answer that one, but there's not really much else can be said. So, and what about you, DK? I think I know what you're going to say, but, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I haven't watched the War Games in colour yet, precisely because I watched this one. So it's a miss from me.
What did you not like about it particularly? Was it the same things as...
It was the same things as Cliff, just the editing, the music. There's a version of Fritz Lang's Metropolis out there. I don't know if you've seen it, the colorized version with the 80s.
I refuse.
Yes, it was like that, but even worse.
Yeah. Okay. Will, have you given us any thought yet? Have you seen this or?
So I haven't seen the Daleks in color, but I was much more inclined to watch the War Games in color, which I did enjoy quite a bit. But the Daleks in color I haven't bothered with just because I didn't particularly like the original serial. Whereas the War Games, most people love that story. I feel like the original episode needed to cut down. This is what it's been given, the treatment it's been given. So for it to be considered bad by a lot of people, it's like, how badly did they butcher this episode? My God, because it wasn't great to begin with. But the biggest problem was the duration, and that's been cut in like a third. Yeah,
I'd be interested to see what you do think of it if you're somebody that doesn't particularly like or thinks that the original serial is too long, which it basically is at 7 parts, basically.
It's at least too long, I'd say.
Yeah, and I mean the kind of weird thing about choosing to do this one is that it's a story that already got a cut down version that you can just watch the Peter Cushing movie, which is that's a 90-minute version of this story already. So it was an odd choice, but thankfully we don't really need your opinion to come to a consensus, Will, because I'm going to also say miss on this one. I for whatever reason I just did not respond to this. I think that the way that they did the cutting and the editing, I think butchered is perhaps the word that comes to mind, and it's so weird the way that they did, like, they describe an action and then show it in a quick montage because they need to race through these things, and it just doesn't really work, which is a shame because parts of it do. I think the actual color itself really pops and it makes it look fantastic. And there's a few other things that they add to try and kind of streamline it for time that I really appreciated, like bringing back David Graham before he passed to do some Dalek voices and kind of do scenes in the Dalek control room that were newly filmed to kind of explain where we are from scene to scene because they had to rush through everything. But I just don't think, for me it worked. And also, like Cliff, that music was just way too bombastic. And it just felt like as soon as it got to the halfway point, the music and the pacing and everything was racing you to the end. And instead of enjoying it, it was basically like, let's just endure this because we're going to hit the ending as quickly as we can, which kind of sucks. But so those are my not particularly great thoughts. If you liked it, by all means, feel free to let us know in the comments below. And statistically, somebody must have. It was made for somebody. So I think it's safe to say that was a miss than the Daleks in colour.
Very much so.
So if I can find my image for the next one, the second thing on the list for today, hit or miss for classic Doctor Who season 7. The actual season, I'm not talking about the box set, just that was the image that I used. So season 7, and Tiki, I'll mix it up and come to you first on this one. Hit or miss?
It's a hit. I love this. I love Liz Shaw. I love the Ambassadors of Death. There isn't a single story on this that I don't like. I think I like Inferno the least because I came to it after it had been lauded so much that I had such high expectations. So I enjoyed it, but it wasn't the be-all and end-all that I thought it was going to be. But I love this, and I always seem to refer to this with when I'm invariably arguing with someone online, because you know what I'm like, where they bring up the old, Doctor Who's woke now, and yeah. So yeah, I love this. I love that.
I just use the Green Death, to be honest.
Yeah.
You don't need to use a full season. Like, there you go. What do you think that was about anyway? Never mind. I'm not getting into that now. So yeah, cool. Fair enough. So you're going to say hit, Cliff.
Definitely
I'm assuming you've seen season 7, Cliff, and you have thoughts on it.
Oh, I adore it. Again, if Remembrance was my first proper TV story, Spearhead from Space on VHS in the rental shop was one of the earliest videos I watched over and over again. The Autons terrified me, and I had nightmares for weeks, but I still asked to rent it again and again until they bought it for me, because it was cheaper than renting it from the VHS shop at £1 a go. Silurians, Inferno were all very relatively early VHS releases, and the books were in the library as well. So it was a very accessible season. Ambassadors I came to the latest. Found it a little bit difficult to get into because of its archive status being so patchy in its look, but I think the Blu-ray has finally made it sit comfortably amongst the rest, and I really, really loved watching the whole lot again recently.
Awesome, cool. And Will, have you seen season 7? Do you need a refresher of which 4 stories it is? Or
No, not at all. So Spearhead from Space I love. I think it's a fantastic opener, and I love Hugh Burden's performance as Channing. That was a big highlight of that story. And then the other 2 stories I like for varying reasons. So, for example, the Silurian story, I love the scripts. I love the story that it provides. I think John Pertwee is superb in it. I think it's his best performance in the series. And then the Ambassadors of Death I love just as much. But for the music, I think the soundscape and the angelic score it has is sublime. And I'm going to get there is a full story, but I'll just say it now. It's a light hit just because I don't like Inferno at all.
What?
And I think it is severely overrated and the weakest of the season. For reasons I get into my Letterboxd review, but I won't get into it now unless I'm asked.
Okay.
But
no, that's cool. That's cool.
It's just a fantastic series besides Inferno.
That's intrigued me, and I'm sure a few people listening will have ran over to Letterboxd. It's Will Templar on Letterboxd, everybody, if you want to see his review of Inferno, because I'm curious. So I
can send you the link to check in the description if you must. But
yes, please. Yeah, that'd be great.
It is quite a thorough review, so I do justify my score of 1.5 stars out of 5.
That's fair enough. I'm going to be very unpopular then. I mean, the consensus here is obviously hit anyway, with 3 out of 4 people. As I thought about this, and admittedly, I have to give this another watch now. I've got the Blu-ray. I've only gone through Spearhead so far. But I think I would have to call it a miss, because for me, the only really great story in the season is Inferno. Now, it's strong enough that it almost kind of wins me over, but I think you've only got 4 stories, and I don't like the Silurians, and I really don't like Ambassadors of Death. Spearhead from Space is good, but I think it's not as good as Terror of the Autons. It's kind of the sequel to it. So for me, it's kind of coming down on the side of miss, because, like I said, there's not enough of it. And as I think about it, I would say it definitely is Pertwee's weakest season of the 5 that he did, for me anyway. So yeah, I'm hoping that going through the Blu-ray might give me a new appreciation, and it has been a while since I've seen these episodes, so maybe something will click. But for now, I'm going to say, on my part, miss, but it doesn't really matter because everybody else said hit anyway. So it's going to be an official hit from the podcast overall, because I don't get to veto everyone just because I'm in charge. Don't tell the American president you can't just do that. Right, so the third thing on the list for today, and I should have said, by the way, because this is kind of a Dalek-themed series that we're doing, I'll try and mix in as many of the sort of Dalek-related things into the hit or miss section as I can. And so the next couple will be, and that's why I had Daleks in colour there as well. So hit or miss this time around is hit or miss for the Reconnaissance Daleks, as seen in Revolution of the Daleks. I couldn't find another name for them. They were just called Recon Daleks, but if you need the picture, it's on YouTube or on screen right now. And Cliff, I'll come to you first on this one.
I'm afraid it's a miss for me.
Oh, okay.
It's like a really, really bad child's drawing has been very literally recreated. And I'm sure that actually happened. And I'm sure the child is lovely and their parents are very kind for letting them do that. But God, it's hideous.
Fair enough. Not a fan. So Will, what about you? I know you've seen this episode. So.
Yeah. I've watched every classic Who, modern Who story, so there's not much that I haven't seen. But
okay.
Reconnaissance Dalek for me is a hit. Conversely to Cliff, I love the design. It's not like an absorbable off situation where that actually can just be thrown straight in the trash can. I think it's from an episode that isn't the strongest. However, the strongest element of that story are the Daleks themselves, and yeah, I've got not much to say on it besides the design. For me, is gorgeous, and I feel like the CGI. I feel like Head Dome, the movement of that seemed a bit weird in the episodes. Maybe that was CGI. But
I think so, yeah, because these are so thin that they kind of don't have a person inside like the other Daleks would. So I think they are kind of CG movements.
The CGI looked awkward in that sense, but otherwise, yeah, I feel like there was the strongest episode of that, strongest part of that episode.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. DK, over to you.
I don't mind it. I don't hate it. I don't particularly love it. I'm gonna say hit, but it's just crept over the line. It's very average for me. I would much rather have the IKEA Daleks.
What? Which ones are they?
The Victory of the Daleks ones.
I'll get lost. The Power Ranger ones? No, thank you.
Yeah, I'd much rather have those. I like the chunky ones, and I have a toy of those, so no.
Fair enough. With apologies to Cliff, I'm going to say hit as well. I like the design of these. I don't think I would if it was a complete redesign and they were like the Daleks going forward. But the fact that they appeared in an episode with the more traditional ones, and so it wasn't like, this is now what they look like, I think sold it for me as like, okay, as an alternative, I think they work. And it's a very unique, specific kind of thing, and it fit that story. So I like it. I think it looks, fine, pretty good. As far as Dalek designs go, I don't think you can really muck it up too badly. I shouldn't say that because somebody will come along and decide to do that one of these days. But yeah, I think for me it works. So again, I'm going to say overall hit on that one. So yeah, sorry about that, Cliff. But I mean, to be fair, DK was hardly glowing in his praise. I think it was a very reluctant hit from him on that one. So, yeah. And so the fourth and final thing for today's hit or miss section is a very obscure Dalek adjacent character. Hit or miss for the character of Mavic Chen. And, Will, I'll come to you first. Why not?
Mavic Chen, I'm just having to remind myself of who
it's on screen if you need a reminder visually of what he looks like. Dalek's master plan. That might help.
Okay. That is a rare story that I have not seen, so I'm going to pass for this one.
Okay. You can do that by all means. So Cliff, have you seen the Dalek master plan or what's left of it? And what are your thoughts on Mavic?
I see what's left of it. I had the Daleks, the early years tape back in '92 or whatever it was, and when there were only 2 episodes of it surviving, and then I was very excited when episode 2 was discovered 12 years later or whatever. Yeah, Mavic Chen, Kevin Stoney recurs in Doctor Who. He's a brilliant actor. I think he's a sort of very Bond villain, he's a very early example of the classic Doctor Who villain, because the Hartnell era didn't do that many of them. And Mavic Chen is the sort of one of the, not the earliest, but one of the earliest sort of kind of humanoid Doctor Who villains that you see. Apparently his skin was blue, I think, and his hair was yellow or gold or something like that. So, there are questions when you look at the black and white photos and go, because obviously Kevin Stoney's skin was not blue or other colours. But yeah, I mean, I think he's very well played, and he has shades. He gets angry, he has calm and smoothness. There's a lot of Tobias Vaughan in him later on as well. When Stoney comes back for Vaughan.
Yes.
And it's nice it's that early example of a human point of contact for the Daleks, because Daleks talking to each other all the time is dull. People kept saying, which is why we had Davros in the end. So it's interesting to see that kind of character.
Awesome. Cool. So DK, I'm assuming you've seen at least, what vibes of the Dalek Master Plan.
Yeah, I like him. I think he's played very well. He had a human villain element to Master Plan. I think it would get very, very tiresome if you had so many episodes without...
Well, 12 episodes, it would have been very tiring.
without his presence. So, he made the character made an impression, so much so that it carried, his shadow was cast over legacy media as far as the franchise is concerned. So, I think he's a decent character.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I have to say the same, Hate. I really like the character. I've obviously, seen the surviving episodes of Dalek's Master Plan and listened to the audio of the rest, because that's really all you can do unless they finally get off their butts and animate it. But I think, from what we can see of Stoney's performance, I think he's really good in the arch villain role without going full kind of pantomime villain, which could have been a real risk there. And I found it really interesting that it was the first Dalek story where they had well, not the first, actually. We'll deal with a little bit of that, I think, when we deal with Dalek Invasion. But the first time we'd had a sort of human villain that was as bad as the Daleks, and it's kind of like, all right, the Daleks are bad, but we've got to deal with this guy who's also, megalomaniac, wants to rule the universe and allied himself with the Daleks and everything. So I think that was a bold kind of move to make. But I think, as you both said, 12 episodes of just, Daleks screaming at each other would have gotten very tiresome. So It was nice to have that element and have that kind of almost political element of him kind of uniting the factions of people to kind of take over the universe or whatever you want to call it. Because he was guardian of our solar system and the others had their own representatives. And it was an interesting angle for the Daleks Master Plan to do all of that kind of stuff. I mean, it does a lot. It's 12 episodes, but I think he kind of steals it for me, which is no mean feat, because you've also got like the meddling monk in a couple of those episodes, and I don't think he does as well as the kind of compelling villain as Mavic Chen does. And as you say, I think the real sort of clincher for me was how good Stoney is when he returns in the Cyberman story as Tobias. Well, that's the really incredible performance. But I think you wouldn't have got that role if it wasn't if he wasn't so good here. So I will cease my rambling and stop sharing the screen now that I don't have to do that anymore, because that concludes the hit or miss section. Sorry, Will, you didn't get to comment on the last one in the end, but
That's all right.
I do recommend checking it out. Checking out the Daleks Master Plan if you can. I really love that story, and I'm gutted it's only 3 episodes out of 12.
Exactly.
That deals with all of the other bits and pieces. Then we're going to jump into the main part of the episode now, which will be our main story review, which, as you know, we explained was going to be the Dalek Invasion of Earth. So the Dalek Invasion of Earth. Let me just start out by saying it's a serial that was first broadcast on BBC One in 6 weekly parts from 21st of November to 26th of December 1964. And in it, the first Doctor, William Hartnell, his granddaughter Susan, Carol Ann Ford, and teachers Ian and Barbara, William Russell and Jacqueline Hill, discover that Earth in the 22nd century has been occupied by Daleks. Well, it wouldn't have been occupied by anything else with that title, but there we go. They work with a human resistance group to stop the Daleks from mining out the Earth's core as part of their plan to pilot the planet from space. And before we jump into the kind of behind the scenes, I wanted to ask what I always do to start off, which is to say, what were your first experiences of the Dalek Invasion of Earth? When was the first time you saw it? Was it for this podcast? And what did you initially think of the story? Let's see, Cliff, I'll come to you first and ask you about that one.
Hey, so I can't remember. I must have seen the Cushing version first before I saw the TV version. I have really strong memories of seeing Doctor Who and the Daleks as a very small child. But I think I properly saw the black and white version. It would have been 1990. I don't know whether it was Easter or my birthday in October or Christmas. It would have been a present for probably one of those things. Potentially a sort of non-chocolate, non-fattening Easter egg, and then I would get given chocolate eggs anyway. So yes, at some point in 1990, and I remember loving it, like devouring it. I had no problem watching black and white old TV. I mean, we had black and white portable tellies in our house when I was growing up, so black and white TV wasn't weird for me. There was plenty of it on TV in the late 80s, early 90s. And I do remember the video quality and the sound quality being quite poor in places, like particularly poor. But yeah, I very much enjoyed it. And then I think we had Sky like for a year before UK Gold came out, which was upsetting because I didn't get to see anything on UK Gold. But yeah, I did get to tape the two Cushing movies off there. And I enjoy both. You know, it's kind of like seeing two different versions of a Shakespeare or they both held their own. I often find it difficult to decide which is my favorite. But yeah, very familiar.
Yeah.
From about 8 or 9.
Cool. Yeah, me and myself and DK probably won't be commenting on Daleks Invasion of Earth because we're reviewing it later in the series. But I know if you guys want to compare, there is another existing version of the story. And I know, Will, in particular, you watched Invasion of Earth, the movie, for the first time to compare it to this. So
yeah,
I'm not going to stop you guys. So yeah, I mean, initial thoughts on Dalek Invasion of Earth. When did you first see it? And you may as well, to tell us what you think of it compared to the movie version.
That's to me, yeah?
Yeah.
So I watched it many years ago when I was about 12 or 13 when I first made my way through Classic Who. I can't remember much from that watch just because, I binge watched it over like 2-3 months, the entire show, and it was ridiculous. But I came back to it about 3 years ago. This story obviously comes after Planet of Giants, which I hated. I thought it was very childish. And so to have this completely different, more adult, more like nuanced story straight after it simply doesn't compare. I thought it was fantastic on that watch. And then I haven't really revisited much HoM since that 2021-22 watch. So I watched it for the first time in a few years the other day for this podcast. And my thoughts are a little bit more middling now. Perhaps it is down to simply watching it on its own amidst like new releases, like today's standards. Whereas before I'd watched it and thought it was brilliant after watching Planet of Giants just before. So it's like tomato, and I've just had to be objective as I can. And I watched it for the first time the other day, like with my girlfriend, and this was her first experience of Classic Who. So perhaps she gave more of like an objective, like non-fan view of the story. So very interesting to see how her mind's like interpret it.
Okay, and how did she find it then, if you don't mind me asking?
No, she found it pretty dated. Like ironically, she found Inferno excellent. She loved Inferno because like I watched that and she was kind of watching it on in the background, like kind of watching it, kind of not. But then she started watching it about part 4 or 5, like Inferno specifically, and she loved it. So it's not a case of like the production values like are deterrents for her. She can like still appreciate it. And from what I can gather, she hated Susan, liked the Doctor, and found the story interesting but unremarkable. And she gave it a 3 out of 5, which
that's not terrible. Yeah,
fair enough. Yeah, it's not too bad.
Cool. And so how do you think it compared with the Peter Cushing version of this, then, Daleks Invasion of Earth?
I think this version is significantly better. I feel like the Cushing film does less work with the story. I feel like it cuts out quite a bit of explanation. Like what I find with Classic Who, like actual Doctor Who, it was quite laborious at times with getting the plot across. And I feel like the Cushing movies, particularly the adaptation of Dalek Invasion of Earth, loses quite a bit of that and has just as much silly / negative criticisms as the Doctor Who version has, whereas the script of this version is significantly more laborious, and I appreciate that. So when I rewatched this, because I watched this at the actual Doctor Who version twice this week to kind of compare it, and I feel like, yeah, the Cushing movies simply doesn't compare. Even the UFOs, you can still, like, the UFOs may be better in the film, but you can still see the wires that suspend it, whereas you can't see the wires that suspend it in the Doctor Who much lower budget version. So it's another case of, like, pros and cons. I feel like script above anything is vital, and that's where the Doctor Who, like the actual quote-unquote Doctor Who version, prevails.
Cool. Yeah, I should say I didn't really have that issue with regards to the effects because, as Cliff was alluding to earlier, I have the season 2 Blu-ray box set, so I only ever watch it with the enhanced effects and the sound. And so the new visual effects make the Dalek sources just look like the modern ones. So it's kind of it's much easier to kind of suspend your disbelief. But the only things I really noticed, I have to say, were the Dalek sources and the Battersea Power Station. The shot of that, those were the only things I noticed that were visually improved, but I'm sure there probably are other things. Most likely, laser effects and things like that, because I know they often do that. But I don't think I've actually ever seen the version without enhanced effects, because even the first DVD release had it. So I've never, I know, blasphemy to classic Who fans, but I've never actually sat and watched the one with the, what I presume are, pie tins suspended on strings, considering it was the 60s.
It's slightly better than the spaceship in the moon base, but not much.
Wow, okay. Fair enough. So, awesome. And so, finally over to you, DK, without mentioning, because we're going to review the movie later, so I'm trying not to get into my thoughts as to comparisons between the two, because I can't wait to do that. But without regards to that, what were your initial thoughts on Dalek Invasion of Earth when you first saw it, and when was it?
It's kind of difficult, because I grew up with the Cushing one.
Okay.
I came to kind of Doctor Who fandom during the VHS tapes era. Unfortunately, a lot of them, the earlier releases at that point, were difficult to get hold of, and this was one of them. So I never really had the chance. I got it on DVD when they started releasing the stories on DVD. I am a DVD peasant compared to you guys with the Blu-rays. And
I had the DVD first.
Yeah, but if there was a 4K, you'd be lording it over me. I believe I don't think I watched this until back in around 2016, when we did a chronological watch of every single episode. Wow. And I enjoyed it. It added obviously a lot more depth to the story than the Cushing one. So I found it quite an unabridged version of sorts, with added layers, because at that point, obviously, because we'd watched them in order, we'd come to know Ian and Barbara and Susan and things like that. So it was very enjoyable.
Awesome. Yeah, and just to quickly give you my thoughts again without getting too far into the review or, comparing to the movie. I first saw it because, being somebody that just looks for the kickiest way to consume things, when I first started deciding to get the Doctor Who DVDs of the classic series that I hadn't seen, I decided the wise thing to do would be to get only the Dalek and Cyberman stories first. So that was my very first exposure to all of the classics. But I think this was among the first ones I got. I think I got Earthshock and this. By that point, I'd already seen the Daleks, the initial serial, because it had been on BBC 4, and I didn't really care for it, much like Will. It's like I didn't hate it, but I just thought it's too long. It's a little boring and laborious at times. It goes on a bit too long. And so I wasn't super enthused, but then was pleasantly surprised at how much, darker, how much better paced this was. And, with the odd little silly exception aside, like the Slyther, which I don't really understand even to this day, quite a serious take and quite a compelling and interesting story. So, yeah. But we'll get into that when we get to the review. I'm sure more about that. So the next stage then for us is to go around and activate the time-space visualizer for a little bit of behind-the-scenes information.
That meant that you could just tune in and see any event in history.
Yes, that's exactly what this is.
No, Doctor, you're kidding.
And for that, I always go to DK, who may not have written it, but he's always prepared to read it out. So, DK.
Exactly. If there's anything erroneous in this, blame Mike.
Yep.
Yep. A hit with the public after their first appearance, a return for the Daleks was soon on the cards. Writer Terry Nation stated that since he'd, in commas, killed off the Daleks, we had to use the logic that was trillions of years in the future, and we could now go back into history and find out what they did. I thought if the menace could be brought to modern-day Earth, it would really make the Daleks supreme in the eyes of the public. Actually bringing them in so we could see them crossing London Bridge, coming out of the Thames, that was the idea. This would be a landmark serial for another reason too. The first departure of a series regular, with Carol Ann Ford deciding to move on. Once recording was complete, Carol Ann bid farewell to her Doctor Who family, writing to Sidney Newman to thank him for casting her. In 1983, she would return for the 20th anniversary special, The Five Doctors, and also make a cameo appearance in the 50th anniversary drama, An Adventure in Space and Time. Despite his success, the future of Doctor Who was by no means assured, and there was much discussion around this time of ending the programme, primarily driven by the lack of resources and studio space provided by the BBC. These discussions had a knock-on effect with regards to the character of Susan and whether she would need to be written out after all. At the 11th hour, facing urgent cast contract negotiations, Verity Lambert had a request approved for 13 more episodes with an option on a further 13. Susan would depart the programme, and the short-term future of Doctor Who was secured. The Daleks first started using exterminate on a regular basis to refer to the killing of individuals. This furthers their parallels with Nazism established in their debut. Here they go so far as to refer to the killings as a final solution, a phrase obviously associated with Nazism.
Oh, when did it get woke?
Prior to this, the Daleks had used the term exterminated, but it was during the final episode of this serial, Flashpoint, that the word, destined to become the Daleks' catchphrase, was uttered for the first time. The 4 existing Dalek props were recalled for use in the serial, 2 of which had been donated to a children's home. All were refurbished with new eye stalks and large fenders added to the base to give them more height, and a dish device attached to their backs to explain their freedom of movement, with it having been established in the Daleks that they moved using static electricity. This issue would be completely ignored after this serial. Merchandising around the Daleks and this serial was, and still is, extensive, with many action figure variants, toys, models, art prints, costumes, books, and CDs released over the years. The Slyther is, meanwhile, patiently waiting for its life-changing licensing deal. That's all you have, Mike. So.
Yes, thank you so much. So yeah, I think I mean a little bit of background information just to give you the table setting for this is always handy. So yeah, so I'm gonna just throw the gates open, as it were, right now, and ask if there's anything that you guys know, particularly I'm thinking of you, Cliff, as an expert, that we haven't covered in the BTS that you think is relevant or pertinent information about the serial.
Well, it depends on whether you define an expert as someone who read The Black Archive by Jonathan Morris earlier this afternoon. So I'm not really an expert. You know, half the viewership, half the listeners for this are going to think I'm Chris Chapman from the Blu-rays, because that always happens.
No.
And I'm not. You didn't think that, did you?
No.
Sorry, I'm off. I've been booted out. No. So yes. So. One quote that in the whole kind of, is this Susan's last story, and if it is, are we introducing a new companion in this or not, that whole kind of thing. There was the quote, Nation specifies that the resistance should include some people of African ethnicity, and also introduces Seda, the beautiful Anglo-Indian girl who will eventually replace Susan in the series. Brackets, this character is subject to variation due to casting or policy, close brackets. So yeah, as you're saying, when did Doctor Who get woke? It's rather beautiful to sort of be discussing that. It took a little while. We're going the long way round, but we've got Verada coming in soon. But they were thinking of it even back then. But my big sort of thing is how much does this story in general and the Robomen just basically get repeated in the Cybermen later? I think there's more than just Robomen, Cybermen. There's a parallel. There's an awful lot that you could draw. Planets moving through space. The whole kind of the zeitgeist, the helmets, the the sort of brain alteration, all that kind of stuff. So it's a story of lots of firsts and influences.
Yeah, and I'll just throw my own sort of 2 cents in with that as well and say that I know this is only the second serial, but it's also the first time that they seem to have realized that the Daleks are kind of limited and they're always going to need like slaves to carry out a lot of their kind of, they don't have arms and legs for a start, so there's not a lot they can do. So as you say, they introduced the Robomen here, and even in the new series, like when they came back in Daleks in Manhattan, they have like mutated pig slaves and things because they have to have some kind of workforce, otherwise they're kind of useless.
Yes.
Their limitations are a bit obvious if you don't have something there, doing the hard work for you. So, again, it's an interesting first because it's kind of like, introducing the Robomen would have been a threat, a big enough threat on their own for a lot of the stories, but they're here, they're just the Daleks, the slaves that are doing all the hard work. So, very interesting stuff.
And the last thing is the concept of plague, because obviously sort of plague is like a big element of Dalek invasions generally, and sort of it comes up in Doctor Who. Like when we were doing our lockdown rewatch of every single Doctor Who in order, the amount of stories I'd forgotten that plague was a thing. It's like, oh no, they're talking about plague. I was watching this to not think about plague for a little bit. But it's a really strong element. The Daleks kind of basically wipe out humanity with the plague over years and years and years, and then come in all guns blazing in about a week and take over the planet. And you kind of always imagine it's like this Independence Day kind of all the spaceships arrived out the blue. As the book, as the Black Archive points out, Nation's description of the society in their synopsis, I think, is basically word for word what he would pitch for the survivors later. So it's basically Nation comes up with his idea of the survivors, because the original invasion was supposed to be in 1980. And then it was set in 2041, apparently, according to the draft scripts and the synopsis. So they took about 80 years to sort of get humanity weak enough to then move in. Oh, okay. And it became like a society like in the Survivors for a bit in the draft scripts.
Yeah, that's fascinating because it's very much just background, drop a quick line in this story, because I completely forgot that was how they conquered the Earth. I just always assumed it was, sheer brute force and they attacked and exterminated a bunch of people, but no, as you say, they referenced they just waited around in their spaceships for a while, dropped a plague on us, and then when we were sufficiently weak, they landed and were like, well, it's not enough of you now to fight back.
And that just makes it a bit more interesting and complex than your traditional B-movie alien invasion, I think.
Yeah, oh, definitely. But yeah, it's kind of, it's a shame they didn't make more of it, but as you say, I think that's probably something that was in the back of Terry Nation's head when he came up with Survivors and was like, we could make an entire series out of just this, plague wiping out humanity and how do you survive? And so, yeah, awesome. Right, so in that case, I'm going to move us through the regular sections that we do our reviews in. If you are new to the podcast or you just wanted a refresher, we break it down into sections like writing and plot, direction, acting, VFX, special effects, music, etc. But, if the conversation flows a different way, as you've probably just seen, we will just, follow the conversation. We're not going to stick rigidly to it, and stop everyone's train of thought. But just in the interest of keeping my notes together, I have a little bit on the writing and the plot first. So I'm going to just give you some information here, and then we'll jump into talking about the writing and the plot overall and what our thoughts on it are. So let me just start by saying that the writer of this serial, Terry Nation, had written 2 stories for the programme's first season, The Daleks and the Keys of Marinus, and was regarded by the production team as fast and reliable, with departing script editor David Whittaker even suggesting that Nation be made senior writer for futuristic storylines and write 3 of the next 10 serials. This idea was abandoned when the series was given a much shorter 3-month extension, but on 17th of March 1964, Nation was formally commissioned to write a 6-parter featuring the return of his most famous creation. The story editor David Whittaker felt the weight of Susan's departure in this story. He later said, "About the last thing I had to do as script editor was decide how Carol Ann should be written out. It was an important decision and we gave it a lot of thought. Susan became the first girl to be married off, but she was an important break, being of course the Doctor's granddaughter. We knew nothing would part him from her except the independent action of the Doctor himself. I think in the process we created one of the most moving scenes ever to be written and recorded for the series." Terry Nation also knew what a responsibility Susan's departure was. Even inviting William Hartnell and Carol Ann Ford to stay with him and wife Kate over a summer weekend to discuss his plans. So yeah, they were very aware of. I think even then they kind of knew, Daleks and everything is important, but the big, takeaway from this is going to be the first big departure of a companion, and it's the Doctor's granddaughter, so it's something they have to deal with. So we may as well start there. That's quite a big thing, and it's kind of an elephant in the room. So what are your thoughts on how the departure of a companion is handled? Now, Will, I'm gonna come to you and ask you on that one first.
Yeah, sure. So in terms of that, I feel like the dynamic between Susan and David was quite ham-fisted at the start of episode 3 because we don't see them really have any chemistry in episodes 1 and 2. However, once episode 3 comes along and about halfway through that particular episode, you do get kind of narrative threads between the two, and then later quite a lot with the Doctor as well, which kind of justifies why the Doctor is so happy to allow Susan to leave in the final episodes. I say allow, it's more of a forcing her to leave, really. But I think with this particular episode and story, could I say, we do see the best and the worst of Terra Nation come out. Like, the positive is, of course, his character work, which is evident. It's clear to see he cares about the show and its characters. And in terms of the negatives, you have like the Slyther, for example, is like the padding.
Yeah.
But what is clear as day is that he cares about the characters, and evidence with the fact that he invited the cast to his home for the weekend to discuss how she should leave. And I feel like a large part of what I assume was said was like the importance of the Doctor being happy to allow Susan to leave with David. So you have multiple moments where David recognizes the Doctor's authority, and there's also a couple of moments that are quite importantly sexist. I feel like the whole marrying off thing at the end is a bit naff, and there's also that moment before where the Doctor says to David that she's a great cook. I feel like whilst that is unfortunately sexist, it does allow for some character beats in the scripts that makes it more compelling and gives reason for her to leave. However, I do think it is slightly undone in the final episode with her choosing to leave with the Doctor instead of leave with David, which the previous 3 or 4 episodes were kind of building to. So it kind of undoes some of that narrative for me. But
I don't know. I would say that she wrestles enough with the decision to justify that. It's obvious she kind of she would have loved to stay with David if it were as simple as that. I don't think she's just but I'm going, so F you, anything. And it has a lot of impact, as much as it's very sexist that it's ultimately the man's decision. The Doctor will decide it. But I do love the line when David is he did it because he knew you never would have been able to leave him. And, that's why he had to make the decision for you. So I don't mind that so much. I don't see it as her deciding to go. It's just kind of look, I can't leave him. He's my granddad. I look after him and whatever else. So much as I would love to stay with you, I just can't. But anyway, sorry to interrupt you there.
No. It's a good point. And I mean, nothing can beat the speech that he gives at the end, which ironically was supposed to be a little longer in the script.
Yes.
Apparently, Hamill fluffed his lines.
Yes, as he was prone to doing.
And I feel like a couple of the lines that were supposed to be in there were quite corny, and what he actually delivered was enough, was apt, and it didn't get me to tears this time. However,
it did me.
It is a tearjerker, isn't it? So it is all justified with that final speech. And I think Hamill, particularly, if we're going on to performance briefly, I feel like Hamill, absolute powerhouse of a performance in this story. And Peter Cushing, for all his talents, couldn't get close to Hamill's portrayal of the Doctor in the story. He owns the role at this point.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, awesome. DK, I'm going to come to you now and ask if you have any thoughts that Will hasn't covered about the departure of Susan in the story.
Yeah, he's touched upon pretty much everything, but I do think they've dealt with the upcoming departure in a way that, as the show progressed, we're kind of just hand wove away with regards to partners suddenly falling in love and leaving. I did I did appreciate the time that they took with Nation, as Will said, trying to bring those threads together, and it wasn't just a done deal on behalf of the companion. I mean, you know yourself that when you look at a lot of the companions and they decide, "Oh, I've had enough," and a lot of us are sat there thinking, "What?
Yeah." I've made that exact point in my conclusion, because I was like, I really appreciate that even though this is the first time a companion departs, that they at least try to build a relationship between Susan and David. And I was like, you compare that to Leela at the end of Invasion of Time.
Yes.
I was like, and I'm even with this guy I've had 3 words with.
Yeah, that's the one that stands out in my mind as well for the Android.
She should have left with Roden.
So yeah, and it's done in such a well done manner. It's so poignant that, you know, as Will pointed out, that speech is iconic. All these years later, it's you know, lifted up as one of the highlights of Hartnell's portrayal as the Doctor, and I think with good reason. I think they, I think that was done really well. A couple of minor fluffs, as you say, that haven't aged well, but other than that, I think this departure is one of the ones that still brings a lump to my throat.
Yeah, it still gets me. I wept a little even this time watching that last speech, because it's really well done, you know. Yeah. So anyway, sorry to jump in. That was my thoughts on it. So what about you, Cliff? Any thoughts we haven't covered on the departure of Susan?
Potentially. I mean, this is me sort of almost spitballing as I'm thinking, really. But I think one of the interesting things you could sort of posit initially is the whole thing about Susan being an alien. And apart from a couple of references, you know, she's a time lady, or at least a Gallifreyan, unless you read the Radio Times story. And that's another story. And basically, it's kind of, you could sort of say, as a sort of very sort of fact-based Doctor Who fan, why is there not more made of the fact that she's an alien? Why is she not like, oh, I think I'm falling in love with you, but by the way, I'm an alien, or by the way, when you're 90 years old, I will still look exactly the same, or I might look like a big ginger bloke or something like that. I might regenerate. I don't know. And then, but of course, for the audience, for the actual emotional core of it, you know, for the children and the families watching, it absolutely makes sense that you play it as a young girl who's coming of age. You know, it's a coming of age drama. She started when she was 15. Obviously, you know, it's not completely linear time. One can assume there's been 2 or 3 years worth of adventures, at least just to fit in the books and the Big Finish audios that someone will come up with in 50 years' time.
Okay, cool. So in terms of the other plot ideas then, let's see. The Daleks plot to hollow out the Earth and pilot it away. This is a weird one because we don't learn about it till quite late in the day, and it's kind of fine, it's kind of cool, but also the more you think about it, the stupider it is. And yeah, so Cliff, actually, I'm going to you. What are your thoughts on this overall plot? And yeah.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, it comes back in Frontios and it comes back in The Stolen Earth. I think Russell T. Davies kind of takes the idea and really runs with it, you know, as a sort of the big, you know, it's almost like in the Red Dwarf novel, the whole playing pool with planets, which he does in White Hole. I think fundamentally, it's a really nice twist. And, you know, it's not aliens coming to Earth for, you know, power. What for? Well, for power, you know, that kind of thing. It's like they've clearly gone, let's give them a reason for doing this. Yeah, you know, it's presented as a big twist, as a big explanation. It's like they've not just invaded the Earth, they've invaded the Earth to do this. And, you know, it's an audacious, big, huge idea. You know, maybe there's more to be done. I don't know if it's been sort of covered in novels and audios, whether they've done more with sort of pilotable planets. But yeah, I mean, the whole kind of idea of space exploration, you know, space exploration is very hard. You know, it requires masses of energy and resources and, you know, building things to travel in space. Why not travel in space on a planet? Because it's got an atmosphere and it's got a sort of sustainable ecosystem to sort of just chill out until you get there. It's better than being asleep and missing all the stars on the way. Yeah, I mean, I think it's you know, it's there's you're right. There's not time to really explore the kind of the nature of it. But as a thing to do, I think all the kids would be going, "Oh my god, that's really I was going to say awesome or cool, but British school children wouldn't have said that. They'd be like, "Oh, that's really
Isn't that spiffing?
that's really whiz bang." I don't know. I'm digging this. No, that's later.
This is groovy. No, that's probably a bit later as well. Anyway, but
It's fab.
Fab. FAB, indeed. But no, I mean, I don't mind it, and I get the point is that it's an interesting subversion of them thinking they're mining for precious materials. And then the idea is like, well, why would they? The Daleks don't give a crap about, resources or whatever. They just literally, they're hollowing it out so they can pilot the planet away. Which I was like, all right, that is kind of a cool idea. And again, if you're engaging child brain watching this, you'd just be like, whoa, mind blown. But
They want Greenland.
I mean, around the time I first saw this, I would have seen Transformers the movie as well with Unicron,
Yes.
giant sort of traveling space planet that eats other planets. So maybe I thought, oh, I wonder if they're going to make Earth eat other planets.
Like I said, something and nothing, that plot. But do you guys have any thoughts on it? TK, any thoughts that we haven't covered on?
It's a little silly, but it's suspension of disbelief. And, when you're already looking at a TV show where the guy travels in a phone box, for want of a better term, then that's small potatoes, really. Yeah, fair enough. And anything you wanted to add, Will, to that?
I mean, I just think you have to think about like the characters, how the characters are written in this story more so than the actual, plot of what they're actually doing, because the germ bombs as well and the key system that was in the cell, like those two things as well have like, why were they there in the first place?
Yeah.
Why do they exist? They have issues that, if you actually think about it, they don't hold up. So similar to like the actual plot of like why the Daleks are there in the first place, that comes up in like episode 5. It's just nonsensical, but I agree with Cliff. I think if you're a kid and just the premise of like digging out the Earth to fly like a flying saucer, that's awesome. So, and the fact that it, like you said, Michael, it is brought up so late in the story, you can kind of ignore it, forget it, just treat it like as it should be in promo. For example, it was the Daleks take London, and that's what the story was to me.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from, and it was nice having kind of David Tennant reference it back and sort of, somebody tried to move the Earth before, which was a nice thing. But yeah, I think it just comes a bit too late, and it also seems like it's designed to give you a very quick and easy way to kill off the Daleks, because like when they reverse their plan or whatever, and then there's volcanic eruptions. And you just get that one line. We don't even see it. It's just a line of like, oh, the volcanic eruption caught all of the fleeing ships. Now all the Daleks are dead. Woohoo. And I'm like, really? All right, I guess.
Is this the first reverse the polarity in Doctor Who?
It may well be, actually. I was just thinking that as I said it. I was like, I'm trying desperately not to see a reverse the polarity of the neutron, or the lava flow in this case.
Yeah.
So, so I think I'm with you, Will. I think a lot of stuff is here to pad out the 6 episodes. Well, not a lot, but there are things that are obvious, because I always think that a 6-part, I think, is just too long. And so I think we don't need the Slyther. The special effects on it are atrocious anyway. So I think we can lose that without losing anything from the episode or the story.
I agree. I just think, especially like, sorry to cut you off, but I feel like episode 5 particularly, by that point, it kind of became the Robomen invasion of Earth, because I mentioned in my conclusion, I feel like the Daleks, after episode 3, with I think it's episode 3 where they actually roam London, and you see Barbara and Jenny and the Professor like go through London and see those things. After that, you don't really see the Daleks, and I feel like too much time was given to the Robomen. That's why when I rewatched it for the second time this week, I was kind of checked out by episode 5. And that is a shame, because the first episode in particular, I feel like that doesn't have any Daleks. But because of the laborious like premise work that I spoke about earlier in the Here on This section, I feel like it actually warrants the runtime. Whereas most people, I think, would say episode 4 and episode 5 aren't very much needed. They don't do enough to kind of propel the plot. I would disagree, but because you do still have like those moments with David and the Doctor, and you also have the excellent sequence with the women in the wilderness in the hut.
Yes,
I feel like
definitely.
you have a few of those amazing moments scattered in there to warrant the runtime. But
Sure, yeah.
I just feel like there should have been more Daleks. That was the important thing.
Yeah, it's a question of affording it, I think, at times, though, isn't it? Because, like, they only had 3 props I think they were trying to use to make it look like a full-scale invasion, so there's only so much you can do, unless you resort to Power of the Daleks logic and just have a cardboard cutout in the background, which are blatantly obvious.
Sure, I mean, it was, like, I did mention the germ bombs as a criticism earlier, but it did, like, say in dialogue, like, they were low in numbers, so they had to deplete the human race somehow,
Yes,
and if there was only, like, a handful of them, then how were they the masters of Earth? Like, I know there's that line in Doomsday where they say, oh, we can defeat the Cybermen with 1 Dalek. Realistically, you can't. Realistically,
of course not.
you need a lot. So there are, like, contingencies in the scripts.
Yeah, no, they're just arrogant, I think, the Daleks. But no, I think, to your point, I love the stuff where it gets really dark about, like, even in the midst of all this, you can't trust every human. And there are bad humans that I alluded to earlier. The idea that you have the kind of black market guy who's profiteering from people's misery. And then just that shocking moment when the 2 kind of women betray Barbara and Jenny to the Dalek. And it's just kind of like, wow, things really are that really gives you the sense of how desperate things are. And yeah, it's a shocking and a horrendous moment. Did it hit you in the same way, DK, when you saw it?
It's humans.
So you just have no faith in us anyways.
No, you're asking the misanthrope here, and that's not a good way to go.
Fair enough. And how about you, Cliff? Were you shocked? Because I thought that was quite dark for a Doctor Who serial, especially the early one, you know?
Yeah, it's it's a lovely little scene. You know, it kind of makes it's the companions are all split up, and Barbara gets a really nice chunk of the action, and Ian gets a nice chunk of the action, and Susan has her love story, which is and a few bits of peril as well. So I think even though it's across 6 episodes, it does use the companions very well. And Jacqueline Hill was such a great actress. They're all very, very strong. I really like that scene. And it's kind of the antagonist. To go back to the antagonist of the Robomen and stuff, what was interesting, and another fact of it in the book, was that originally Terry Nation wanted to do mutated survivors who lived in the sewers. So there was going to be a whole range of other antagonists, which would basically kind of come back in the Mutos in Genesis of the Daleks as an idea. Yeah. And the Slyther. So the Slyther is basically a sort of distillation of, well, we can't have lots of humans, and that's all too complicated. They kind of boiled it down to a crocodile and a Slyther. So it's a moment of jeopardy to kind of pad things out, because there's later on Robert Holmes would do his whole, well, the best way of approaching a 6-parter is to do a 2-part story that then leads into a 4-parter, or a 4-parter that has a kind of 2-part epilogue, where you change the scenery around a little bit, or you bring in some new characters and get rid of the old ones. And so they were kind of feeling their way. And I do agree that episodes 4 and 5 kind of do tread a little bit of water. You've seen most of the exciting stuff by now, like most of the new stuff. But I mean, we do have the sort of advantage of episode 5 being on. I think it was broadcast from film, so it suddenly looks beautiful quality after the rather blown out part 1. Because I think it was edited on film because of all the model shots. It was kind of easier. And so that looks gorgeous. So that's my kind of geeky brain going, I don't mind this so much, even though not as much plot is happening. But yeah, and just one note, are we going to talk more about the Slyther, or can I throw in a little Slyther fact now?
No, by all means. I mean, I'd rather leave it in the dustbin of life. But
Well, here's a funny thing. When I was at drama school in my first year, a director came in for the second years, and I read in with the other actors, because the idea was that the director would pick one of the second years and give them a little job in a play. Because he was this lovely guy, Michael. My brain has suddenly... Michael Friend. I'm so sorry. Michael Friend. And he cast lots of Doctor Who actors. I went through old programmes, and there was Alan Benyon had been with him, and all sorts of like famous classic Doctor Who actors. And anyway, so basically, rather embarrassingly, me as the first year, I read in, I got picked to be the actor who would go and get £100 and play a waiter in 2 nights of Widowers' Houses by George Bernard Shaw up at Shaw's Corner. And so the idea is I was understudying this other actor who was playing the waiter because he had to go off and have dental work. And the other actor who I met at a rehearsal was Nick Evans, who played the Slyther. So I understudied the Slyther in my first ever professional paycheck as an actor.
That's awesome. That's a heck of a story. Yeah, excellent. Awesome. Yeah, I think I don't like all this kind of padding. Like I said, I don't hate episodes kind of 4 to 6 in the ways that you guys seem to have a bigger issue with, because I think there's stuff like the slightly sinister humans and what they go through that works. And as I said, the reveal of what the Daleks' ultimate plot is kind of ultimately works. But I think things like Ian's entire subplots, for me, just he doesn't need to be in this. He basically meets a guy, that guy gets robomanized, he kills him, then he meets another guy whose brother gets robomanized, and it's just kind of, it's so pointless to the main story. It's just like, we need to give poor William Russell something to do. And I think it's meaningless. And even like Will was kind of alluding to earlier, this idea that the Doctor proves his intelligence by whatever the heck that magnetic lock thing is, that's just a waste of time for me. And it doesn't make any sense that they decide that he's intelligent enough to become a Roboman. Because, like, you don't need to be intelligent. Isn't that the whole point? Wouldn't intelligence be counterproductive because you'd be more inclined to kind of fight back with your own brain power?
I think it's hilarious as well because the Robomen, I feel like the actors are so atrocious and they speak so slow. However, they're like deemed to be the most intelligent human beings, and the others are like whisked away to be in the mines. That doesn't make sense. They should be more intelligible, because when the Daleks ask questions to the Robomen, often, more times than not, they would say "not known," "unclear," or stuff like this. It's like, these are not intelligent human beings.
No. Well, I mean, there's only so much you can do with the idea that there's kind of, I mean, it's a silly idea. Like I said, the idea the higher brain functions are stopped and you've basically robotized them. It's a silly concept and you can't really explain it, which is why I don't think they do. And they do a much better job of it when they finally create the Cybermen out of this. But I will say the other thing that really bothered me about the Robomen is just how shoddy those costumes are, because that helmet falls off just so easily. Anytime they get into a scuffle, the helmet is straight off, and I'm like, well, then he's fine, he's freed. Because your helmet's gone, man.
I mean, you wonder if there was something lost in the translation. Again, not from the book. This is just my speculation. But I mean, if the idea is they're removing all the intelligent opposition, so anyone that shows a glimpse of intelligence, they wipe their brains and use them as muscle as a result. Maybe that was the idea, except it doesn't come across in the show. What I do like is the whole Ian thing. Basically, the script says, well, Barbara is a history teacher and Ian is a science teacher. So at the end of the day, let's position Barbara to be in a position where she can do a load of bullshit history to confuse the Daleks and talk about the Boston Tea Party and stuff. And let's put Ian inside the bomb. We need to defuse the bomb, or at least do something to change the bomb. Ian is a scientist. He plucks wires out and puts wires in things. So we'll put him in the bomb because he's a science teacher. So I think there's almost this sort of childlike logic of let's try and make it appropriate, or let's make it so the children will understand. I wonder.
I think, perhaps, but maybe they also thought Ian was more inclined to turn himself into what is blatantly a little toy mineshaft, which doesn't look at all remotely convincing. I just thought that was there are Thunderbirds effects that look better than that thing. But anyway, you think they could have updated that, but no. Anyway, that's a nitpick. Actually, it's 1964. You've got to forgive them a little bit, but it did kind of throw me out of the story in that last part when they were talking about the Daleks' plan to hollow out the Earth, and then you just see this really blatant dapple toy Dalek and little toy mine shaft and everything. Credit where it's due. I will say that. I love the stuff in episode 3 of the Daleks perusing London. It's easy and it's cheap, but it blooming works. Just put a villain next to a London landmark. It's the same as when the Cybermen emerge from St. Paul's. Somehow it just looks amazing and you just go, oh, yeah, cool. I recognize that place. And there's a Dalek there, you know. So I kind of, I dug all that. And
I agree if I combine, but I just think the score massively undercuts it. Like the xylophone during that sequence was fucking abhorrent. And I feel like in another episode, another sequence, I think it was when Barbara was chasing after David to get into safety. You have like this sequence where it's like heavy drum beats, and my girlfriend Chloe, she was fencing, at the school. Like what's supposed to be like this amazingly like tense sequence. She's there dancing to take the piss out of the music, and I can't blame her because the music, besides from episode 1 and the very final moment with the Doctor's speech, I don't think it was as subtle and tense as it needed to be. And the xylophone ruined it for the London sequence. And when Barbara was running, it was the drums that kind of ruined those moments for me, which should have been so much better.
Yeah, I see what you mean, but I don't mind it. For me, I was just picking up on the kind of tension part of it with her. Well, it's Barbara, Jenny, and Dortmund, and then Dortmund sacrificing himself, which is all really well done. Which, you know, I probably get into the acting a little bit, but I really didn't like how much Jenny was just a bitch. Because I was just like, well, Barbara has the patience of a saint, because I would have slapped this woman like 6 times by now. Just, stop being such a misanthrope. Shut up. Yeah.
There's a lovely line where Dortmund says she's not callous, really, you know. People have to fight the Daleks in their own way. And it's like one line that kind of surmises how people's stress responses, and you know, it's bound to be a David Whittaker line. I think an awful lot of the character lines are David Whittaker rather than Terry Nation, judging on his later stuff.
Really, yeah.
But yeah, I think it was. It is odd to think she was possibly going to be the companion after Susan at one point.
I had heard that, yeah, but it's not so much that. Like, I can understand somebody being callous and shutting off emotions because of their dealing with this, but it just seems like instead of writing like that, they just make her such a downer. It's like she's the Debbie Downer SNL sketch, because anytime that Barbara's like, we're going to do this and skip the Daleks, she's like, oh, it won't work. We're terrible.
Yeah, there's no character arc which they would have done later. Exactly, you know, it's just like that. That's just how she is.
Like my favorite line from this entire story, if we exclude the final speech, is the Slyther Ian is coming straight for us, which is my favorite like line from the entire story, just because of his stupid delivery. I think like the Slyther warrants his place just for that line. That really ridiculous cliffhanger in episode.
That line's there though because you couldn't tell what it was doing otherwise, because it's such a terrible little monster costume. Like, oh no, it's right on top of us. Oh no, the shaft we're in is moving. You know, if you had better effect, you wouldn't need to tell us what was happening. But anyway.
Oh no, we're going down. We seem to be moving down.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is crazy.
Yeah.
We seem to be criticizing this story, considering we all really like it, I assume.
Well, we have to give a balanced view. You never know. But no, on the very, very, very quickly though, I will say I love the cliffhanger ending of part 1, even though it makes no sense. The Dalek coming out of the water. No reason why it should be in there, but it still looks cool.
Yeah. Do you want to know why it's in there?
Okay, go for it.
So basically, the original plan was to get the Doctor and Ian to the Dalek spaceship area for the end of the episode, and then a Dalek would come out of the spaceship or around the corner near the spaceship. And then David Whittaker thought, well, that's a massive, massive set that we've got to erect just for 2 scenes on this episode. So I'm going to keep it all down by the water and by the ruins. But then where's the Dalek going to come from? And then, that would be cool. So, yeah, that's why.
Cool. Awesome.
I mean, I feel like episodes 1, the cliffhanger was like so strong, and episodes 2 and 3 cliffhangers were comparatively weak. Like, if we're mentioning the cliffhangers, like episode 2 is the Doctor being turned into a Roboman by a Dalek, despite the Rebel invasion force already being around when it's happening. Like we're stupidly directed to act oblivious in the background when it happens. And like in the next episode, the Dalek like seemingly just drifts off it into an oblivion, allowing the rebels to wreak havoc and rescue the Doctor. And episode 3's cliffhanger that's resolved a few minutes into episode 4 is a bomb, which I assume, to be fair, I assume to be an attempt at padding, but it could also be like interpreted as another way to evidence David's ability to protect Susan and from a threat under pressure. But like episode 1, besides that, the cliffhangers, not for me.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm going to move us along because we don't have a lot of time left, and I'm going to jump into the little bits that I do have. So apologies if you have anything else on the writing, but I think we've kind of covered it. So jumping into the acting then, I only have one little bit of information, which is to say that Carol Ann Ford later said of her departure that she, quote, would have left earlier if I could when it became evident that the character was stuck in a rut and wasn't going to be allowed to develop. Sidney Newman wanted her to be identifiable to teenagers, which she was, except she could have been much more way out. She could have been a style leader. She could have worn extraordinary clothes. I remember being in a state of rebellion almost the whole time I was doing Doctor Who. Each time I got a script, I just hoped and prayed that I was going to be given something different to do. unquote. So, yeah, she wasn't fond of the character either. It turns out, Will, just like your girlfriend. So
Yeah.
she's, but she doesn't get a whole lot to do, which is a shame. But I mean, I think just to quickly go through the acting, though, everybody in here is fantastic. You've already mentioned how good Hartnell is, and that David actually gets a character. I think Susan's really good, even though they kind of do that annoying thing of, oh no, I've tripped and broken my ankle. Oh no, in part one,
That
which
made me
is
roll my eyes, man.
yeah, it's
Like,
terrible.
they're doing this again.
Yeah, and I don't like, as I already kind of alluded to, I don't like the guys that are with Ian because they just feel superfluous. But I did like Dortmund's kind of heroic sacrifice, and I love Bernard Kay as Tyler. I think he's great, and you know, it's an interesting presence through all 6 episodes to kind of keep you grounded as to where we are and the effect it has on people. So that's my thoughts on the acting. I'm going to throw this open to you guys. Any thoughts on the acting that we haven't already referenced?
I mean, like I said, I rolled my eyes at Susan twisting her ankle. However, I feel like this goes into like a more of a scripting thing. But I do feel like with it being her final story, it does give her a little bit more to do. So there's a comedic side with what do you do? I eat. I feel like that was a moment that actually like made me laugh out loud. So,
I cook and I eat. Yes.
And then this like episode 3 onwards, and particularly in episode 4, I feel like she like gives an excellent performance, like actually making the love interest believable. Like they don't get much between the two to actually like develop chemistry. However, I think it's down to the performances mostly where it's actually somewhat believable, even though most people would say she would be better off with the guy from Marco Polo. Can't remember his name, but
No, I can't either.
yeah, but nevertheless, I feel like Caroline Ford, besides the twist of the ankle, which was like very unnecessary, and I'm not sure why it was included, because by episode 3, her ankle was absolutely fine. She just had to be carried around in the first 2 episodes.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
think she was very, very good. And like I said with Ian, he was on autopilot, Paul William Russell, and Barbara was fantastic, as was Hartnell. Other than that,
Awesome.
no going out.
Cool. In that case, I'll move to the direction because I do have a little bit of kind of relevant information, I think, with regards to that. With the scripts underway, Richard Martin was assigned as director of this episode. He'd already directed 4 episodes of Doctor Who, including 3 episodes of the Daleks debut serial. And although he frequently clashed with producer Verity Lambert, everyone was aware his frustrations were born of his ambitions for the programme. Originally titled The Return of the Daleks, then The Invaders, this Dalek rematch got underway on 23rd of August 1964 with the first major location shoot. Director Richard Martin took a minimal cast and Dalek props to central London, shooting scenes of the supposedly ravaged, deserted city at dawn. He said, "We started at about 2 a.m. on a Sunday, and the police said we had to be out by 6. So we were sitting there waiting for dawn, and we did it as a running thing. Trafalgar Square, a couple of Daleks snooping around the cenotaph. Then they went whacking across Westminster Bridge with the Houses of Parliament in the background. By this time, the first buses were coming, and we were having to work around them. But the Dalek operator, Bob Jewell, wouldn't go fast enough for us. I was giving him a hard time, pressing for faster, faster, faster. He was pedaling like fury, absolutely hated me." I just find that amusing. And with the story eventually titled Dalek Invasion of Earth, studio recording commenced on 6 consecutive Fridays, taping 1 episode a week from the 18th of September in Riverside Studio 1. And as you'll probably have noticed, William Hartnell had to be written out of the serial temporarily when he injured his back in a fall during camera rehearsals on episode 3. Given time off to recover, he was removed from episode 4 during last-minute rewrites, which is why you get that fantastically stupid sequence of the clearly not William Hartnell Doctor just fainting at the start of that episode. "Oh no, I must be out of this episode, Susan." Oh, terrible. But yeah. So I think that's we've kind of talked a lot about all of my favorite things about the direction, but just there's a couple of nice Dutch angles. There's some good use of the Dalek props, which they can do. There's not so good use of special effects, unfortunately, but a lot of the stuff that they do, I think, works really well. So, any thoughts on the direction before I move us along from here?
I've got quite a few notes, but go ahead, Cliff. You go first.
Oh, okay. Briefly, I love the Dutch angles as well. They're very effective. There's a really lovely sequence of I think it's Susan and David hiding, and a Dalek just comes around the ruin of a building and just checks it out and then goes again. Yes, in episode 3, which I really loved. But yeah, he's ambitious. There's some nice camera moves as well in the bunker where Dortmund is quite early on. There's a lovely sort of shot from all the way into Dortmund, and someone, I think Tyler gets up and Jenny's there and they follow him around. So he does fairly ambitious setups. So, you know, he leaves space for a lot of things to go wrong. But there's other stuff like the Daleks are always mobile, you know, in certain 80s stories, and, you know, they're just very static. But there's always little twitches and movements. And there's a bit where all the Daleks swarm around the black Dalek like they're insects, which is just really good.
I was so distracted by that. I didn't love it because it just looked like they were playing Ring of Roses, just going around in circles for no reason.
Yeah, it's like the sort of the dark version of the Evil of the Daleks, Dizzy Doctor kind of thing.
Yeah.
You almost wonder if David Whittaker remembered that and sort of said, "Oh, I'm going to do a version of that." But it's like it's one of those. If you're in the right mood, it's just fantastically alien and weird.
Yeah.
Or maybe if you're in a different mood, it's silly. I've probably felt both.
I just found it distracting, I think. But yeah. Anyway, so yeah, sorry, Will, you said you had a few notes on the direction to share.
Yeah, similar to Cliff, I thought like the camera work in episode 1 particularly was incredibly impressive. From Hano in the TARDIS at the very start to the bridge falling, I thought that was all excellent. A bit with no dialogue was the episode establishing the human versus Roboman conflicts, with the implication that David stabbed the Roboman found in the warehouse by the Doctor and Ian. I thought like that was an effective establishing point, particularly so since I had no dialogue. I like how the Dalek moves and rocks forwards and backwards continually. However, I did not like the voices at all. It's as though there had to be pauses between every word, and I hated that. And similarly with Daleks, I don't like the extermination effects. It continues to be awful.
No, just a couple of things about the production and the VFX that I haven't quite gotten to yet, which is that they obviously, you'll have noticed that they put Dalek graffiti on the various London landmarks, which is why it looks kind of weird and alien. Apparently, they got in severe trouble for doing that on the cenotaph. You're not supposed to do that. So the production team got in trouble. And I don't know if you probably noticed as well that the signs everywhere that say vetoed. Supposedly the reason for that is that whenever the production team were giving the director or whoever was responsible ideas of things to put in the background, they kept on just sending them back with vetoed marks on. And the production team got so pissed off in the end that they just used big vetoed.
Chloe, my girlfriend, asked what that meant, and I was like, I have no idea. Now I'll be able to tell her when I finish this.
I remember asking my gran what the word vetoed meant, because she was a prolific reader, and if I saw words that I didn't know, usually on Doctor Who, I would ask her. And it's like, oh yes, you know, we've decided. And because it's used so often in like political terms and everything, I still to this day, it's like, they vetoed an elephant. How do you veto an elephant?
Well, yeah, that's the reason for it. They've got so annoyed at the, whatever your plan is, they give them back a picture with vetoed on it, and they were like, I'll show you freaking vetoed. So it's everywhere on the production design, which is fantastically petty, and I'm here for it. So, yeah, awesome. We've talked a little bit about the music and the sound. We didn't particularly love it. DK, you're a music guy. Anything you wanted to quickly add to that?
No, I'm pretty much in agreement with you guys with regards to that. It's not. It's not. It doesn't stand out particularly
awesome.
well.
Yeah, we could probably talk about this for ages because we seem to have a lot to say, but I don't want to keep the podcast over 2 hours, so I'm going to try and get us to the end now as the best I can. So first of all, we are going to open the Subwave network for the audience and critics' response to this series.
I'm transferring the Subwave network.
I have very quick one paragraph about the critics, and then quite a few things where I put the prompt on social media to ask what people thought about this story. Excuse me, and I have quite a few responses to that. So I'll start off by saying that contemporary reactions to this story were positive, with many praising the return of the Daleks. Retrospective reviews are also positive, with particular praise directed at the first episode's cliffhanger and Susan's emotional departure, though the direction and pacing has been criticised. So the serial later received several print adaptations and home media releases, as we well know. And so moving over to the information that I was given, the opinions and thoughts of the various audience members who replied. These are various Facebook groups. So starting in Dalek Earth Force, Dalek20 says 5 stars, the ultimate Dalek story. From Worlds of Sci-Fi, Fantasy and Horror, Michael Rauch says, definitely one of my favourite First Doctor stories and a sad ending too. Back to Dalek Earth Force, James Leaper says 5 stars. It is a timeless classic story that I come back to regularly, ahead of its time and pulled off so well. Great shots, scenes, acting for its time, soundtrack and writing. I love the Dalek coming out of the Thames, the poster by the river, the Slyther, the Robomen, the desperation of survival in a desolate world, the portrayal of the women showing that desperation and how not all humans would be on the same side. Beautifully written, memorable, and the music for the farewell scene was spot on. So there we go. Ian Sack in the same group says, I might not call it a timeless classic, but it was a very good story, though a bit long. The longer stories of early Doctor Who often were. I liked the Slyther, or rather them hiding from the Slyther and just hearing it, though I prefer to think of it as a guard dog rather than a pet, and there should have been bits of it at the bottom of the mine shaft, and when you saw it, clearly didn't look so good, not uncommon with monsters. I'm not so fussed on the goodbye scene, but it was the first ever regular to leave the show, so... Yeah, from my personal Facebook, Owen Blakewell says, a 5. Yes, dated these days, but a story of epic proportions, set in an unthinkable situation where the Daleks had invaded Earth and won. That's shocking enough, but just as our heroes save the day, we get another shocker. The audience relatable assistant leaves. So, yeah. And finally, from Blue Sky, Steffi Jen... sorry, this isn't Blue Sky, this is from Mastodon. Steffi Jen at Steffi@toot.wales says, I love this one right up till the last Dr. Susan moment, which was a bit WTF. He could have at least chucked her shoe back out the door. True. That eerie scene with Barbara pushing the wheelchair through a deserted London, though, absolutely brilliantly conceived and filmed. One of my favourite Doctor Who moments. So, yeah, I think fairly positive all round, I believe, from the audience there. So... we're going to jump into the things that will wrap up the podcast, starting with our favourite character moment and line, which I always do on my podcasts. So as we, the guests probably weren't expecting this, DK, but you will have been. So as not to put them straight on the spot, I'll ask you first. What was your favourite character in this serial and why?
It's just Barbara. Jacqueline Hill's just fantastic.
Awesome. And
it's already been touched upon that, she always held her own. So, yeah.
Awesome. Cool. What was your favourite moment or scene?
It's incredibly basic, and you mentioned it earlier. It doesn't make much sense, but I still love the Dalek coming out of the Thames.
Yeah, awesome. And do you have a favourite quote? It's probably going to be the same thing as all four of us saying. It's going to be obvious, but go for it anyway.
Yes, it's the same one that you guys have. It's the speech.
It's the speech that starts, one day I shall come back. Yes. So, I more or less said the same. My favourite character, I like Carl Tyler. I think he's a relatable dude trying to do his bit against crap odds, and a rare supporting character who doesn't turn evil and survives the whole story. And it's Bernard Kay, who's, a legend and kept on turning up in Doctor Who, which is cool. My favourite scenes I've already kind of referenced were the iconic scenes of Susan and Jenny running through London as the Daleks famously cross Westminster Bridge. And yes, my favourite quote was, of course, the Doctor's speech at the end. So, Will, we're going to come to you next. What was your favourite character, first of all?
Like DK, I would say Barbara. I think her performance was like Jacqueline Hill performance excellent. And I love her hair. It's just wild as ever. Also, my favourite moment would be Barbara driving through the Daleks. I thought that was hilarious. Fucking girl boss. It was excellent. And my best line, like I said earlier, besides the closing speech to Susan, was the delivery of the Slytherin is coming straight for us. I
like it.
Hilarious. And I want to be a little bit different. So, yeah.
No, that's great. Awesome. And so what about you then, Cliff? Do you have a favourite character moment and line?
Oh, yeah. I mean, obviously, the final scene is absolutely beautiful, and there's a reason why it comes up in the Five Doctors and other things. The "I eat" line was very funny. The thing that made me laugh out loud was when I watched it today, when Ian finds the corpse of the Roboman in the building at the beginning, and he says, "A whip. Why?" Only a few minutes after the Doctor has said, "What you need is a jolly good smack bottom." Which I remembered Hartnell saying kind of fondly before, in a sort of, I don't actually mean it. But when I watched it, it's like, he did say it in a way that he kind of meant it. I think the final scene, not just the scene where Hartnell delivers his speech in the TARDIS that we see the clips of all the time, but I think that last season of Hartnell and Susan together, just before he goes, when he has that, he's already made his mind up, but he's almost like searching for a reason not to, and then just looks at her and is like, yeah, it's got to be done, and he takes the shoe off, and that's that little bit before is beautiful.
Yes, absolutely. No, I agree. I think that whole ending scene actually is great, because even the start of the realization that they've got to rebuild Earth as they're kind of all saying goodbye to kind of Jenny and Tyler and David and everything. So everything starting from there till the very end, I think, is quite poignant. So,
Yeah, Big Ben.
Yeah, Big Ben starting to chime again. Absolutely, yeah. Wow, awesome. So, yeah, then all we need to do to wrap up is to all give our conclusions and our score out of 5 stars. Will, I'm going to come to you first.
I'm sorry for how long my conclusion is.
Mine's always super long, so just, fully expect that. Anyway.
Okay. So I put the Dalek Invasion of Earth is a solid, inoffensive, yet incredibly pivotal set of episodes. I feel as though the earlier episodes are stronger than the later. Though each episode, besides episode 4 perhaps, has redeeming qualities, like from episode 3, the character beats between David and Susan being implemented. These, in my opinion, justify the runtime in what I'd consider a breezy 6-parter. A frustrating lack of Daleks in episodes 4 and 5 made this story evolve into a sort of Robomen invasion of Earth, and that's where I think a lot of people's pacing criticism comes from, I can imagine. And I said, just give us more time with the Daleks. Nevertheless, it features a powerhouse performance from Hartnell. His unforeseen absence in episode 4 was evident, and he was sorely missed. Jacqueline Hill was fabulous, and the character of Barbara was rarely this good again. The ending speech from the Doctor to Susan is superb, with a beautiful sign-off from the Doctor. Though it was disappointing to see the lovely character beats between episode 3 and 6 not be good enough for Susan to be able to make the decision to stay on Earth herself, even more so when it seemed like she was hell-bent on leaving with the Doctor before the decision was made for her. We see the best and the worst of the writer's nation in the story, but the overriding feeling I have is like he clearly cared about the show and its characters. It's a mixed bag that certainly leans on the more positive side. I feel like it's a huge step up from the dismal childish serial that precedes it, and as the first prolonged location filming the show ever did, it's mightily impressive. And I'd like to take a moment before we wrap up later to make a announcement of sorts about that. As for a score, I'm going to give the Dalek Invasion of Earth 3 stars out of 5.
Okay, 3 out of 5, fine. And so Cliff, do you have a conclusion and a score out of 5 for us?
I haven't written one, I'm afraid. So
that's fine. We don't necessarily expect you to have a full-on written thing, but just, if you have any kind of final thoughts that pop to you and then a final score, that would be fine.
Yeah, I would say it's a 4.5 stars or 5 stars if we're not doing half stars.
No, we do half stars. That's fine.
Okay, let's do 4.5 stars. I think what it does well, it does absolutely beautifully, and what it doesn't do well, it kind of earns points for being a pioneer in that sort of thing for the sake of Doctor Who as well. I think it kind of rides into the B-movie fun of an alien invasion and then subverts a lot of the cliches or makes things a little more complicated and a little more interesting. It's the first time Doctor Who really goes out on film. I don't think they take any sound. I think all the sound on the film is dubbed over later on, because I was looking through, there's only one tiny bit of dialogue, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. But yes, it sort of steps towards what we expect of Doctor Who in late 60s, 70s, 80s and beyond. The Daleks look incredible. Their voices aren't as good as they are earlier and later, but the Blu-ray does fix that. It's a companion departure that has a lot more thought and a lot more space given to it than some of the later ones. So I really love it. I've loved it since I was 8 years old. I won't mention the Cushing film because of your other podcast, but I can always write in and you could read a skeeter.
Oh, by all means.
But yes, a 4.5 star pioneer.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Thank you for that. DK, conclusion and score, please.
Yeah, I kind of guessed with everybody being on the show, so I've just given it a pretty short one. I've just said it's always awesome when you look at these early seasons to see the scope of what was planned, even if the execution isn't 100%. There are some really great moments in this, but unfortunately it's tied together with quite a lot of padding. But, we are classic Who fans, so that's kind of par for the course. Special effects aren't altogether fantastic, but there is a sense of eeriness in that first episode that still grips me to this day. There's some fantastic performances and some really iconic moments. We've gone over and we all know what they are. So yeah, it's still enjoyable, and I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 5.
Okay, awesome. So, as I just quickly work out the average for when I'm finished giving my score, because I know what this is. Right. So, yeah, my conclusion, again, sorry, it's long-winded, it always is, but not as bad as it sometimes gets. I said, I've long held the somewhat controversial view that any classic Doctor Who story over 4 parts is too long, often suffering from repeated plot beats, filler, and pacing issues. To be brutally honest, this serial still feels that way in places. The Doctor breaking a special Dalek lock, the subplots with Craddock and Larry and the Slyther, all feel unnecessary, seemingly included to pad the runtime. The Daleks could have been revealed earlier in episode 1, and we definitely should have learned their ultimate plan before the middle of episode 5. But that said, this is one of the least egregious examples of my usual complaints. The extra time allows for fantastic world building and character moments. Tyler and Jenny reinforce the harsh reality of life under Dalek rule. Dortmund's heroic sacrifice is powerful, and Susan and David's romance is developed in a way that later departing companions could only dream of, looking at you, Leela. The sinister human characters, from the black market profiteer to the women who betray our heroes, add an extra layer of bleak realism. Being 1964, some things were simply too ambitious. Certain effects fall flat, attempts at scale are hindered by studio constraints, and the mineshaft sequence is laughably toy-like. But then there are the incredible haunting shots of Daleks around London landmarks, where fantasy collides with stark reality in a truly chilling way. While it still suffers from the usual classic Who length issues, the sheer strength of its world-building, performances, and iconic imagery make this a story that continues to resonate. And I give it 4 out of 5 as well, actually. So, yeah. Adding those together, dividing by the 4 of us here, gives a final score for the Dalek Invasion of Earth of 3.8 out of 5. So, not too shabby, I would say.
Sorry, guys. I feel like I dragged down a little bit.
A little bit, but, you've got to live your truth. You've got to be honest. So, yeah. And I've had a fantastic time. I could have happily talked about this for ages, and you've all contributed so many brilliant things to this episode, so hopefully everyone enjoys it, because I've enjoyed taking part in it. So, yeah,
Sorry.
Yeah, fantastic. No, go for it. And that brings us to the end of our journey through the Dalek Invasion of Earth. We've braved the dangers of a conquered planet, seen some heroic sacrifices, and thankfully made it out in one piece. So, as I said, a huge thank you to our fantastic guests. Cliff, it's been brilliant meeting you and having you on for the first time. I say meeting virtually.
Hey, and the same, yeah. It's been a lovely, warm, friendly, interesting thing. I'd love to do it again if you want me.
Absolutely, anytime. Absolutely, yeah. But we always aim for just seeming like a friendly kind of chat with a drink, or by the fireplace chatting about geeky things we love. So it's always nice to hear we've pulled that off. And where can people find you online if they want to hear more from you anyway, Cliff?
I'm on Blue Sky. I'm Cliff Chapman. Some people confuse me with Chris Chapman, the wonderful Blu-ray producer and director and Big Finish writer. I'm not him, although I have worked for Big Finish. I'm in Blood on Santa's Claw 4 times, which is rather fun. I'm currently acting in Prison Escapes Utrecht in the Netherlands. So I live in the Netherlands, by the way. I'm speaking to you from Alphen aan den Rijn. I did a little chat with some Doctor Who fans in the Netherlands for the Dutch Whovians last week, and so yeah, I'm online. There's also a horror story called The Collection from Final Rune, which is available to listen to on Spotify for free, and it's 3 novellas of a horror theme, and I do the middle one. The collection, okay. So by Cat de Silva. So if you want to hear my voice, if you liked my voice and want to hear several hours of it and in a different sort of way, you can do that. And I'm available for work. I'm very cheap and good and quick.
Awesome. And if you do fancy sending me some links, I'll pop them always in the episode description for to direct people to these things, Cliff. That'd be great. So,
thank you very much.
Yeah. And of course, thanks to our very own 11th Doctor superfan, Will. Always a pleasure.
No, thank you very much for having me back. It's similar. I wish this was longer. I wish we could speak about this story for 4 or 5 hours, I'm sure.
Yeah, probably.
But yeah, it was fantastic. And while I'm just going to announce now, I have been doing a Doctor Who documentary for the last few months. It's been in production since December. I'm releasing it soon. It's called The Locations That Time Forgot, and basically I'm bringing it up now because I feel like it's a great opportunity, because this is the first ever Doctor Who story that did prolonged location filming. So the first one was obviously the Reign of Terror season before. However, this was the first egregious example, and it was fantastic. So it's kind of going to look into where the locations are now in terms of how they've been upkept, if they're still around. And I basically chose out the 15 most significant stories that use location filming, and it's fascinating, it's interesting, and I'll be releasing that around July or August. So there's an exclusive for you. And yeah, if you're interested in that, go to my YouTube channel. I'm sure it'll be in the description. And if you're into the game shows, there's a channel called Who Game Shows that Michael featured on very prevalently, and DK also occasionally featured on. So if you want Doctor Who game shows, check out that channel as well, and that's where you can find me.
Absolutely awesome. Thanks. And you are coming back to review Victory of the Daleks with us that we briefly mentioned.
I'm very excited for that.
So, yeah, cool, awesome, and brilliant stuff as always. Huge thanks to my loyal companion DK. Thanks, bud.
Anytime, fella. I've enjoyed this. It's been nice actually. I know I joked about it at the start, but it's been nice kind of sitting back and listening to the conversation because it's been such a good one.
Awesome. I'm pleased to, feel like we probably, took a lot of the things you were going to say from you, but as long as you've been enjoying yourself.
Nay, I am so sorry. It feels like I gave you no room to talk, but...
No, don't worry. Honestly, I've really enjoyed listening.
Awesome. That's fantastic. Yeah, I'm pleased to hear it. Hopefully the listeners will as well. And if you want to keep up with us, all our social media links are in our link tree, which you'll always find in the episode description. Or if you're watching on YouTube, it'll be flashing up on screen right now. We will be back at the same time next week, where DK and I will be joined by our guest Toby and maybe Connor. I'm still waiting to hear back. And we take a look at Christopher Eccleston's intense showdown with a fellow Time War survivor in the 2005 episode simply titled Dalek. Plus all the usual fun segments to go along with it. And hopefully you can join us then. Until then, keep travelling hopefully, and as the Doctor would say, Allons-y.
Allons-y! You've been listening to the Hit or Miss Doctor Who podcast, part of the Hit or Miss Who Trek channel. Hit or Miss Doctor Who is hosted by Mike Wilson and DK. Behind the scenes and additional material by DK, scripted, produced, and edited by Mike Wilson. Adapted from an original podcast created by Will Templar. Follow us on YouTube, your podcatcher of choice, and our social media. Links to all of these can be found by clicking on the link tree in the episode descriptions. This podcast is a Media Matters original production. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this podcast through all of time and space. We'll be back for another thrilling TARDIS trip soon, but for now, Doctor, I let you go.